And hello, welcome back to the Gay Racing Podcast. Zack and Alex are back with you. Alex, today we have someone really cool joining us, someone that I've wanted on the podcast for a long time. And today's finally the day. Alex, who's coming on?
We got Ryan DeCosta of NBC Sports. And if you don't know who that is, I guarantee if you're on social media, you've probably interacted with him before because he runs the NASCAR and NBC and IndyCar and NBC accounts on social media. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Let our listeners and watchers get to know you.
You're a pretty big deal.
I try not to.
You are. I mean, like, listen, you're like the little like virtual like text voice of NASCAR and IndyCar for a lot of people. I mean, you know, on social media. So
yeah,
at least on NBC.
Like not to brand someone as like an unsung hero, but like it's funny because you're trying to grow two of these sports as best as you can. And you're not like, hey, by the way, I did this. It's me. Like you try to support your own work by like retweeting, but like at the same time, sometimes it's the Wizard of Oz doing it behind the curtain. Like nobody knows. But I feel like over the years, I've been a little bit more public about like, hey, like this is what I do. Like if people want to get into this field, then more open. I think in years past, like you probably don't want to, be as public about it in case someone like some stranger danger. But I think from the perspective of just trying to help other people out, then I think that's the way to go. And I've been enjoying being a little bit more public about it.
Awesome. And we'll ask you more about that, like what kind of advice you would give people later on. But
absolutely,
what I want to know, Ryan, is a couple things. How did you get into like racing, motorsports in general? And how did you kind of get to a career in social media at NBC?
Yeah, which came first? I'm curious.
Oh, definitely the racing.
Cool.
So it's funny. My whole family was basically born in like the Boston area. So they were big hockey people. They were big like Red Sox, Bruins, all the Boston sports and everything. And racing wasn't really a thing up there outside of New Hampshire Motor Speedway.
Right.
I'm different because I was born in Maryland. And so as a result, my mom, instead of hockey sticks, because there were no real hockey rinks anywhere near me. No. Not to mention hockey, very expensive sport. Just ask my younger brother who did go that route. They got me little Hot Wheels and monster trucks and got me into those types of things. And, as a kid, my favorite breakfast cereal was cornflakes. I feel like a lot of NASCAR fans probably know where this is going. My mom got me some Hot Wheels and she knew that I liked cornflakes, and she's walking through like a Walmart or whatever it is, sees a die-cast like Hot Wheel that has cornflakes and the number 5. I'm playing with that little toy car, having no clue really that it was a NASCAR Cup Series car. My dad's flipping through the channels and he's on ESPN. It's like 1994. So I'm not even 3 years old yet. And I see that car on the screen. No concept that it's actually winning the race or anything, but it goes on to win the race. And I'm like, oh, it's the cornflake car. Like, can't see the balls, right? Like,
that's so cool.
So
that's cute.
Just hooked, really, and started to watch it with my dad probably a little bit. And he never really was a racing fan. I'm a first generation racing fan. So I think what really locked me in, though, as a racing fan was, and it's fitting that we're going to Bristol this weekend. Do you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
My screen just went black. That's why. So it's fitting that we're going to Bristol this weekend because, what was it, 1990? 1995. So 1 year, just about a year later, they're at Bristol. It's August. I'm watching that race, and Dale Earnhardt is coming up on Terry Labonte, last lap, hits him in the rear bumper coming off the floor. Labonte crashes, but wins the race anyway. And I just remember not knowing these names then, but knowing now, like Dr. Jerry Punch going like, he knocked the cornflakes out of that Chevy. And
we don't have announcers like that anymore.
At that point, locked in, never missing racing, like studying it.
Wow.
Toy cars, just locked in at that point. That was my moment from NASCAR where I really got into it.
The butterfly effect of cornflakes making you a NASCAR fan is insane.
Yeah, I mean,
power sponsorships.
This podcast is not sponsored by Kellogg's, to my knowledge.
It's not yet.
I might be, but I'm kidding. So yeah, that's really how I became a NASCAR fan, and just front to back, I would design little tracks. I had the cliche. I think everybody, like 90s kids, know what I'm talking about when I'm saying like the carpet that was like the city.
Oh yeah.
That had like the helicopter pad, and I'd be running through and making my own street races and everything.
Yes. Oh, those were peaks.
I'd have notepads, and I'd just design my own road courses.
The notebooks. Oh my God.
I designed maps. I was just obsessed with like car culture and everything. Started young.
I was very proficient in math as a kid, like in school, and it's because I added points to my little NASCAR point standings. Like I was doing math all the time. That's why I was so good at it in school, because I was doing it for NASCAR stuff. Yeah.
Why did that carry over to me? I did the same thing. I suck at math.
I don't know.
That ain't fair.
Maybe it's the glasses. I don't know. But anyways, so did you know, like from like a young age, that you wanted to do something like for a career in that involved racing somehow? Like when did what you currently do kind of come into the picture?
Like what I currently do didn't really come into the picture. Like I wanted to be a race. Who didn't want to be a race car driver growing up, right? But but I think I moved around a lot when I was a little kid. There was one period in my life where like 4-5 years in a row, I was the new kid in school, going from school to school, and just being that new kid, like trying to find yourself at it at such a young age is really tough. And my freshman year of high school, really, I was still kind of struggling with it. And my English teacher noticed it, and he was the president of the school newspaper, like the club. And he suggested one day after class that I show up to that. And that one moment, I think, really changed my life. And I'm eternally grateful, for that. Unfortunately, he passed a few years ago, right before COVID. And before that, I got to actually visit him and tell him, like, straight up, like, you were the biggest reason.
Shut up. That's awesome.
That I went down this path. And I'm so glad I did, because I think I was, and I still am, very much an introvert. But I think that really helped me become a little bit more extroverted, and come out of my shell a little bit, be more social, be more interactive. And I think at that point, just as time went on, I started going into the broadcast journalism route. They had, I don't know if you guys had this, but the homeroom, like the news broadcasts.
Yes.
Like they'd, like the little TV studios that they had.
Yes, that was so cute.
I was part of that, and I would help with like the sports reporting, and I'd go to the sporting events for the newspaper, and that was really the point where I was just like, hey, I really want to work in this broadcasting in some capacity.
That's awesome. That's a
That
great
is-
story. And the fact that you got to go back and tell the person who inspired you, that's even better.
Yeah, I
And
was about to start crying.
and
That really
as we
touched me.
said, you are with NBC Sports,
Sure.
and you mentioned you are an introvert, but the social media accounts of NASCAR and NBC and IndyCar and NBC might tell a different story, because I'd say those are the two most active accounts on social media that like engage with fans and engage with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I want to talk to you about, because
Sure.
that's something for me. Social media is just so powerful, and like the engagement and the parasocial relationship is just so powerful, and it makes you feel connected to the sport. And is that something that like NBC kind of like go ahead, or is that just something that you kind of do on your own accord? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Sure. I think the first word of social media is so important. Social. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think that it's a one-way street. Like, we're just feeding content to people constantly.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest keys is to really interact with the fan base and not be snarky, although I've certainly been snarky at times if someone if it warrants it. But I think just having these interactions, trying to be informative, that's the most important thing. I think at the very core of NBC Sports, IndyCar and NBC, NASCAR and NBC, the goal is to try to make lifelong fans, because at the end of the day, whether it's NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, the Olympics, like these could be that person's first ever experience watching or seeing a clip of this sport. They might not have a clue what is going on, and we want to try to hook them in and try to make them lifelong fans, make them want to come back the next week or the next time the Olympics come around. That's the biggest goal for anybody. And so I just think engaging with the fans is an extremely valuable thing to do. I think that it feels a little bit different than some of our competitors sometimes. I think one of the things that you really need to focus in on is, why are these people fans? Who are they fans of? Try to get data from them a little bit. Try to figure out, get a pulse. Like, hey, like, who was your favorite driver growing up? All right, Dale Earnhardt, Terry Labonte, Jeff Gordon. Like, okay, like you're a Dale Earnhardt fan or a Jeff Gordon fan. Maybe you align closer to like a Chase Elliott or like someone at RCR. So just trying to figure. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. It just keeps logging me out. I'm sorry.
That's exciting.
So something that I noticed, and you're talking about with the drivers, is I noticed when the driver wins a race, you'll do retweet this post if your favorite driver won, or let's say your favorite driver is Ryan Blaney. Blaney wins, and you say repost to congratulate so and so. And that's just an easy engagement, but it also makes those fans excited. Like, they could retweet it and they say, "Look, my driver won the race." Yeah, and I think that's one of my favorite parts of what NBC does.
Yeah, I think there was a period actually on Twitter where they were like, "Hey, like maybe." Actually, no. Let me backtrack. Facebook was really that way when. I don't know if you remember when they first introduced things other than the like
like the
love button and the ha-ha. For a little bit, my first season my first season at NBC was the year that rolled out, and people would start using that as a voting mechanism. Like, who do you like? Daniel Suarez, use the like button and use the love button or the ha-ha. And
that's cute.
I thought it was cute, and I thought it was an easy way to get engagement. And then Meta would come at everybody and be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't use these as your voting tactics. But I guess on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, I think it is a social way to go like, hey, here are the top 10 finishers. Be proud of that. If your favorite driver is so and so. And it's funny because last year, especially, if AJ Allmendinger finished in the top 10, and we'd say repost if your favorite driver finished in the top 10, I knew every single time that I checked the comments, Justin Haley would be there because of like, yes, my dad finished in the top 10.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I love Justin Haley for
I love that little dude. I love
I
him.
love
That's
when
awesome.
drivers get involved in these interactions too, because I think that just only helps them too. I like it. You want to create these interactions. You want to showcase these drivers' personalities. So,
and speaking of drivers, quick question for you. Do you have a favorite interaction with a driver, whether it's in social media or in person or at a media day?
I know my favorite that you had, but
what is it, Zach? Well, he thinks about it.
Oh,
sure.
It was that little you were talking to David Malukas in like a clip, and you know what I'm talking about? I forgot how it goes.
Good luck with the Indy 500. Thanks, man. Me too. Me too.
Yeah, you too. Every time your name comes up and I think of you, I just think
full
of that
disclosure,
clip.
that video. Full disclosure, that video is exactly on my dating profile because I'm like, by the way, I work in racing and I do goofy stuff with these people sometimes. And if people like racing, they might recognize that person that I'm doing stuff and like, oh, that's a cool job. So
that's my favorite.
I mean, full disclosure,
that's my favorite.
That's probably up there. I mean, you were the ones who pitched that. I mean, flash forward, we asked who you wanted to see race the tiny cars ahead of this year's media day, and it was you who said, "I want admin to race against David Malukas."
Yeah, did I say that? Wait,
yes, yes, you were the one who said that, and I was like, "Challenge accepted." Like, David, are you in? And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm in." We flash forward. We're in Indianapolis, in this hotel like ballroom type setting. And there's all these conferences and they all go through their little bullpen. So maybe they'll do something with Firestone, with Chevy, with IndyCar, with NBC, et cetera, to try to do marketing. They'll all do the rotations. Yeah. David comes in, and he's got a handheld camera that is like straight out of 2002. And he's just documenting, vlogging this day. And he hands to me and he was like, "Are we doing this? You're doing this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this." And sure enough, we got to race and he was waxing me. He probably, if he took the right corners, he would have beat me by a half a lap and I realize I do not have the physique of an IndyCar driver. He is an IndyCar driver. So I think that was a bit of an unfair advantage. I had no prior, time behind the wheel of that little tiny car for what it's worth. And so getting to race him was very fun. And that was just another circling back, like asking the fans what they want to see and literally doing one of the things and the drivers getting excited for it.
That's so fun. And so we have a question here from one of our Patreon subscribers. This is from Tanner. He asks, are there difficulties between writing a social media post in the regular season versus the off season? Because in the off season, you have a lot less to talk about.
True.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you definitely see the quantity of posts go down in the off season for good reason. I think there's a lot of cool moments that you can come back to, be like, hey, this was the closest finish. What's your favorite finish? Like certain things that are very interactive, but it is very difficult when you don't have like, all right, I don't have Bristol or Kansas to look forward to. Like when I go to Bristol, I know I'm going to be posting the Rattle His Cage quote. When I go to Kansas, I'll probably post Carl Edwards riding the wall, right? Like you have these ideas in place based on a race, but when you're in the off season, it definitely becomes a lot tougher. Just trying to think of little things. And then at the same time, when you're in off season, like at NBC Sports, there is no off season at NBC Sports. Like as soon as I get into my NASCAR off season, really, it's pretty abbreviated because I help out with the NFL
that's cool.
as much as I possibly can.
That's cool.
And then next thing you know, like 2 weeks, it feels like goes by, and we're right into Supercross and Super Motocross, and then we get into the Roar Before the 24. Like it's a very abbreviated off season, and I don't think that. I think it gets more difficult when you're trying to isolate it by sport, but I think you just have to sometimes use your resources and spread them across and help out in other areas. Like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about like the Olympics for sure.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things where you're scheduling all of these posts in June, July that are going to go out in that gap.
When you work on the NFL stuff, would you say that it is easier for you to do or more difficult because it's not like your core thing?
I think it definitely feels a little bit more difficult for me just because I never really was. I mean, when I was hired at NBC, it was literally to be the NASCAR on NBC community manager. And I'm thankful that it has evolved and it's allowed me to diversify and think differently and help in other areas. You know, I don't feel like I know every single inner working of, I guess, how football works.
Right.
I'm a football fan, right? But as far as like the content to make, sometimes I do feel a little bit more lost, I guess.
Well, you don't have a whole library of like stuff because you've been watching NASCAR since you were a kid. You have a whole library of stuff.
I don't have that knowledge of like, all right, we're going into this week and I remember this specific football play from 1995. Like in the same way, like we're going to Bristol. I know who won the 1995 Bristol race, right? Like, and I know the bumps and runs to highlight the Jeff Gordon and Rusty Wallace that's happened twice now. So like having that, you can't teach that really. So that's where it does get a little bit more difficult from that side. It's
sure.
When I do stuff like the Olympics, it's very stressful. But at the same time, it is so much fun. So,
yes.
Right. And that can kind of go into our next Patreon question here. We'll go into the Olympics because our Patreon subscriber, Tim, wants to know. He was a former social media manager. The Olympics assignment sounds awesome to him. He wants to know, what is it like working with the events, athletes, and other influencers for the Olympics?
It's a lot of fun. Just I think that we really found a way to be really creative with this one, this past one especially. The past three that I've worked were a 13-hour difference, time zone difference between where the Olympics were taking place.
Oh God, yeah,
where the Olympics were taking place and like the Eastern time zone, right?
Yeah.
So at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, the day was just starting over there. So you would sometimes see finals events live, whether it was the Beijing 2022, Tokyo, literally 6 months before because of COVID, and then Pyeongchang in 2018. So, but this year it was a 6-hour difference. And so we were really tasked with trying to make the primetime experience, which didn't have live events going on. Huge logistical challenge, but it actually allowed us to think really creatively in how we enhance that experience.
Yeah.
If you were a diehard fan of water polo, you knew so-and-so won gold and so-and-so had this awesome play. but maybe you didn't see in primetime, we had a camera that was isolated on a family member who is like, track and field's probably the best example, actually. Like Tara Davis Woodall won the and Hunter Woodhall is like, you did it, baby, you did it, and just like being this super fan. And we saw that and we're like, all right, we're gonna roll that out in prime time to enhance this moment when we think that the highest number of people will actually be watching. Right. Like there's definitely that subset of people who will be watching live, but during prime time, that's when you have that biggest TV window. That's when most people are going to be tuned in to rewatch maybe a moment or are seeing it for the first time. That Hunter Woodall moment just went super, super viral because we were just thinking creatively. It wasn't just, hey, so-and-so won gold at 2:00 in the afternoon. We're going to save this moment for prime time, like just the highlight itself. Like, how is it going to be the best possible clip that we can post in that big window?
And speak of going viral, I believe you were the mastermind behind a certain post that went around with gymnast Steven Nedorozic with the Your Friend Steve meme.
Yes.
Is that you that did that?
Steve. Love him.
Yes.
I'm in love with that man. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Oh
let it be known on the Gay Racing Podcast. I am in love with that man. If you're listening, Steven, listen. I know you have a girlfriend. Listen. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Steven's awesome.
Oh my God. He's America's sweetheart.
I am the one who created the Your Friend Steve video. And we were just this Olympics, especially, my role was dramatically different in the sense that I was not necessarily creating as much stuff directly myself, a lot of the graphics, but I was directing it. I was trying to come up with like, hey, like, how can we make Steven Nedorozic look like he's Clark Kent on a comic book? Like, working with graphic designers who are way more talented than I am and try to make it look like that for that moment. So I had my hands on two different Steven Nedorozic things. But at the same time, I am an elder millennial who liked Garfunkel and Oates as growing up. They pretty much were the precursor to like The Lonely Island with like Andy Samberg and all that. So I just remember being in my cubicle area and popping my head out like I was a freaking whack-a-mole and going, guys, I have an idea. And it's like, you guys know that do Steve. Like, I'm just like trying to pitch this in an empty room, not an empty room, but like a room of like, there's probably like 15 people in there in our specific space where we're all just chatting with each other. They come in shifts, right? And I just pop up and I'm like, guys, what if we did that? And I start singing it to them. And my boss, thank God that he is a fellow elder millennial. He'll hate that I'm telling him that, but it's the truth. He knew it instantly, and he's like, do it.
Oh, that's cute.
Oh, that's amazing.
I just I pop my headphones on and just get to work, and like 30-40 minutes later, I'm trying to find all these little fun shots and like little tiny zooms in and adding the text. And I'm like, all right, I think I got it. I posted, awesome. And I don't know, I don't know if you use Slack or what you use to communicate like certain ideas, but Slack's what we use.
Text message.
I just, there. We have text message. That would be some group text for all group. But I just post the video in there and I wait. And all of a sudden I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna post it. I'm not gonna be like, guys, come and watch this. Come and watch this. I just pop it in like our group Slack for review. And like 2-3 minutes go by, and I'm just like, all right, getting ready for like certain graphics for the next morning are getting delivered, and I'm just trying to make sure everything's in the right place, right? Like that was my main role, making sure like the tune-in graphics are being designed for the morning after. That was like one of my main roles. But when I had downtime, I'd meme away. 3 minutes go by. All of a sudden, I just hear my boss just go, just losing his mind laughing. And I just start laughing with him. And everybody, he's just like, guys, come on. Like he starts gathering everybody around to watch it.
Cute. I love it. My shift during the Olympics this year was 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day. And so it is around 9:45, 9:40. Yeah, it's a lot. It gets tiring, but
couldn't be
it's like 9:45 at night. And I'm asking them like, hey, like team, do you have any other things to post? I don't want to double up or anything. I just want to make sure that we're not like triple posting 3 different things at once. And it's like, are we good to post it? And I literally already had the copy of the post. I already had the text already prepared. It was already on my phone. All I needed to do was hit the button. It was like, and I just remember looking at my boss, and my name's like, screw it. Boop. Like, you're doing it now. By the time that I got out of the office, it had already had, I think, 100,000 views, which just shows you in that moment, like how many people were just talking about Steven Nedorosik and the pommel horse guy and just sleeping. And he was like, his job is just pommel horse, like all those, like the Barbie, the Ken meme.
Yeah.
And so by the time I leave the office, it has 100,000. By the time I get back to my hotel room, which thankfully, like they set us up pretty nice. By the time that I was back in the office, it was already at 1 million. By the time that I got up the next morning, it was at 10. And I'm like, holy cow. I honestly didn't expect it to see that. But I think one of the most gratifying moments of that is just for anybody that was working that is if they posted something and you went into the comment section, is like, one of my favorite comments that we'd get was something along the lines of like, NBC hired the right social team for it. Like we're having fun.
Yeah.
And like anytime that you got something like that,
5-star
you
review,
could be so exhausted. And that would just give you the boost that you needed in that day.
That's your why.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
I
cute.
think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I want to shift gears over to IndyCar because as everyone knows, this was IndyCar and NBC. The time NBC has the rights for IndyCar has come to an end, sadly. And what,
as Lee Diffie said, for now,
can always come back someday.
Yeah, honestly, we have no idea. Like,
yeah,
I mean, we know that the NBA just came back to NBC, and it had been like 20 something years. So it's one of those never say never.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, they eventually went back to NASCAR, so yeah.
Correct, yeah. I didn't even think about that. You're right.
That's a good point.
Yep. So what I want to start off with is, what's just your favorite moment? If you could just think of something right on top of your head, what's your favorite moment working with IndyCar and NBC together?
Oh, man. I just think that the people, without a doubt, if I could pinpoint one specific moment, covering live, even though it was working remotely in that moment, because it was still there were still COVID restrictions. It has to be Elio joining the 4-time club.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. I knew you were going to say Elio.
Getting to be part of that historic moment. That solidified that I needed to go to the Indy 500 the next year, as long as everything was,
wow,
normal.
Yeah.
But getting to see him climb the fence and run along the track and covering that whole entire moment was very special.
I bet.
Doing getting to go to the Indy 500 2023. That's when I met you. I was on the red carpet.
I yelled for you. I had to push through a crowd to get to you. You wanted to say hi.
And as a result, everybody knew my name for the rest of the time.
I had to get your attention.
Hey,
I
Ryan,
yelled your
can I
name.
get a picture with Adam Driver? I'm like, no, I'm working. But that was funny. That was one of the drawbacks of that moment, but I was very grateful to meet you in the moment.
Yes.
But getting to witness the 2023 Indy 500, getting to witness this past year's 500 as well. And then 2022 was crazy in its own right. All three of those were fun. 2019, just like some of the executions that we were trying to do and coming up with these ideas. Oh man, like doing the media days though, like that's I think probably my favorite. Coming up with the concepts of what we want to do. Maybe it was trying to dress them up to look like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, or like I think the biggest one for me was definitely the tiny cars types of executions that we started. I just remember 2022 toward the end of it when we were getting ready for the 2023, like the start of the season shoot. When we pitched tiny cars, it was not well received. I thought there was a bit of a worry that we were making them like a caricature, I guess, to a degree. And it wasn't until I think the college football playoffs, they did interviews where they put them basically in the elementary school seats. So they're like, here are these 300-pound linemen trying to sit in the cars that we sat in, or trying to sit in the seats that we sat in like kindergarten. And they're comically sized. And that was the breaking point to go like, hey, like, yeah, let's give this a try. Let's do this a couple times with Hinch. And basically the direction that we gave James beforehand was like, have you seen Between Two Ferns with Zack Galifianakis? And he was like, yes, one of my favorite shows. And it's like, channel that energy. It's like, oh, I'm like already that naturally. So it's so funny because I think there's one moment, I don't remember who it was, but that first season, I am you can faintly hear me laughing in the background of one of the answers. Like if you're just listening, you wouldn't notice it if you didn't know it.
Yeah.
But I do because I know what I did.
Right,
I just hear like a little tiny faint wheeze of me trying to hold in my laughter unsuccessfully. But I think this year was the first time that the marketing team really said like, hey, we have two different stations. I'm going to be manning this station. Can you direct this yourself? And getting to really work with them, and in some portions where Hinch wasn't available, actually being the tiny car interviewer was a lot of fun. It's kind of how we got Stingray Rob doing the worm randomly. I don't know why he decided to do the worm, but I'm very glad because even to this day, that video is still getting a bunch of likes. It's up to like almost 40,000 on our Instagram right now. It's such a goofy video. Like just the
worm.
Yeah. Can we do the worm? I would like to do the worm. So
okay then.
Yeah. No, he's
what a goofy little guy.
But at its very core, it's just trying to realize like, hey, like these people are human, right? Like, I think the tiny mics and the tiny cars and walking and talking and trying to learn which driver is like plays a lot of Mario Kart doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to destroy you and I'll play like Toad.
Oh,
Like, that's fun. Like, anybody, I think you might not be a NASCAR driver, but there's a good chance you've played Mario Kart. And something that's relatable to the fan base or anybody.
Yeah. And now I want to ask you another last question from one of our Patreon subscribers. This one's from Blake. You did kind of already say the Indy 500 was like a favorite event of yours. Mm-hmm. But he wants to know, what are your favorite events that you've gotten to attend in person related to work? And I want to kind of twist it, like, because I think you.
Is this
assuming it's the Indy
specific to IndyCar or no?
Anything.
Oh, sure.
Anything.
But I also wanted to add to it, what is one you would like to cover? Like in person?
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'll start with the first one that I've gotten to attend in person just this year. Really was the Caitlin Clark Mania. Her chasing the record. It really was kind of spontaneous. I want to give a verbal shout out to Graham Rahal. I know that sounds very random, but Graham Rahal walked in on, I think, Monday or Tuesday of that shoot, because each driver had a different day for the shoot. And he shows up, he's like, hey, like, I don't want to be here till 5. And I looked at him, was like, I don't want to be here till 5. And we looked at our schedules and saw that we had a time that all matched up. So we were able to like get our stuff done at like 2:00. And that basically meant that I was done with my all of my shoots by like 3:00. I'm like, that gives me enough time to drive from Indy to Purdue, because Caitlin Clark was playing Purdue down there, and I got to cover, got like credentialed and everything, and got to go to that game. I think like a month or two later, thankfully they liked how that went. So as she was really pursuing the record, they were like, Ryan, can you fly out to Iowa because she's getting really close to getting this record. She might get it in the next like 2-3 days. Can we fly you out to Iowa and then drive out to Nebraska to see if she breaks it in either of those instances? So getting to go to an Iowa game where she was on the verge of breaking the record, and that was just so much fun, and getting to be part of that environment. Awesome. I think from a NASCAR perspective, I think anytime that I'm at the championship is really special. I think 2021 was an interesting one because I didn't have the photographer vest that allowed me directly on the front straightaway in that moment. I did have that for 2022 and 2023. And so there's actual photos of me chasing after Joey Logano and Hudson as they ran up the racetrack to get the checkered flag. Wow. I was sprinting with them to get the shot, and I flash forward, I get that shot, and I post it. That was like in the infancy of Instagram collabs. And we invited Joey. I didn't even tell him like the video. I didn't get to see him really after that moment, but we invited him and he accepted. He thought it was such a cool moment that we were able to like capture it just felt so natural. It wasn't this fancy camera or anything, but it's just some opportunistic like iPhone footage. Right. But, getting to do that. And then this past
what would you say is one that you'd want to do someday that you haven't yet?
Daytona 500. I've never gotten to go to Daytona period, which I put that at the very top of my racing bucket list now that I've crossed off the Indy 500.
You've never gotten to go to Daytona. That's crazy.
Yeah, I would love to. Talladega, another one. I just think sometimes it gets so chaotic, and I think just the timing of schedule sometimes where Daytona 500 is fresh off the NFL season and people deserve some time off.
Yeah.
And then Talladega is right in the middle of the NFL season. So like,
and even the Rolex
if I'm going to one event, then we need to have support on the back end. And there's definitely periods where I'm like, hey, like I don't want to pull a couple of people away just so I can go travel to an event. Like I think there needs to be a purpose behind it. That said, Daytona is like top of my list, and I really hope someday. It doesn't look anywhere in the near future as far as like the contract goes, because it looks like through 2031?
I think 31.
Maybe 2032 we'll get the Daytona 500 again. That would be what would that be, like 26 years in the making? So
I'm ready. Listen, with Lee Diffie on the call, I'm ready for y'all to have the whole season.
Yeah, that would be electric.
Have you met him?
Yeah,
surely you've met him. How he's just literally like my favorite person on earth. Like I just love him.
Have you met?
Not yet.
Okay.
Like, screw race car drivers. I want to meet Lee Diffie. Like, I don't even want to meet Joseph. I want to meet Lee Diffie. Like for real. Sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm very sure.
Oh my gosh.
And I assume you're responsible for like the little clip of, the 4 races that he's done so far and his calling to the finish. I'm so
that was
happy
one of those like, hey, like it's every once in a while, like, I think the reception to Lee Diffie has been mostly positive, and I feel like the only negative feedback that you ever get is like he has an accent, and I'm like,
that's ridiculous.
So does someone from like the most rural part of North Carolina.
I haven't even.
Let's be honest here.
I don't think it should even be given time of day. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's talk about actual things.
If you talk to my dad, you'll be like, my dad has an accent. It's a Boston accent.
Dale Jr. had an accent. No one said anything.
Yeah. That's another valid point. I didn't even think about that.
Actually,
What Lee has is absolute passion. For anything that he covers. The man knows how to cover a race, whether it's in track and field. Like, think about the body of work. Think about the body of work that Lee Diffie has done just in this past year alone.
The past few months,
like Supercross, he did some. He did the one. He did all of the track and field events. Does IndyCar, and then shifts right into NASCAR with his return race, I guess, because it's been a couple of years since there was that one where they switched, but he jumps right into it at Daytona and
knocks it out of the park.
And what I love about the Daytona call, especially, is the fact that final lap, you have a lead change. And so that final lap, it starts out where he's talking about, like, you'd have to go back a long time, 2008, Kyle Busch, last time that he won at Daytona. Last time that he's never had a winless season in 20-something years, right? So he's talking about that. And then Harrison has this run, and he instantly recognizes it, and he's able to say, like, this kid from Huntersville, Jeff, your little boy has done it. Like, that's so electric. And
it's brilliant.
And like the Watkins Glen call that he just did, it's like he literally knew that Busher and
it's like he's already seen the script.
Like it float like him
to say NASCAR scripted.
Him comparing Ambrose and Keselowski to that moment.
Yeah.
And then it literally flowing into shades of Keselowski and Ambrose as they make. How does he do that? How does he know?
I have no idea.
I don't think NASCAR fans realize how
to line up. Like that, his commentary about Ambrose and Keselowski could have just as easily happened, and then SVG cruises, or SVG somewhere screws up like the last left-hander. You know, like how much do you? It's just so perfect how it lined up, and very unexpected from SVG to have that moment. But I was listening to the Actions Detrimental. They were looking at the SMT data, and apparently Chris Buescher made up 2.5 tenths in the S's, and he put that pressure on SVG. So more power to
we
him.
talked about that on Monday.
Oh yeah,
And I do want to say about Lee Diffie, my favorite call of his is on a personal note, as I'm a huge Joseph Newgarden fan, as everyone knows. The first Indy 500 when he says, "Is this the moment when the pain ends?" And that's just like, it's perfect because he's been trying. Joseph had been trying for so long to win the 500, and his voice just showcased how powerful the Indy 500 is. And like, I was at the race. I didn't watch this till later that night. And it was like, oh my God, like it brought me right back to the racetrack. He's phenomenal. And to kind of point back to what we were talking about earlier, like parasocial relationships, Lee Diffie is one of the best interactions on social media.
Oh,
like absolutely. I'll tell him, I'll reply to his tweets like, "You had a great call today." He'll like it. He'll respond like, "Thank you so much." And
he's great.
When he made his like farewell post to IndyCar and NBC, I responded like, "It means a lot to me personally that you were on the call for both of Joseph's 500 wins," and he liked it. Like, you know, like I think he's a great guy, and I'm so happy NASCAR has him. Like he's phenomenal.
Glazed donut emoji. Like I'm sorry, Lee Diffie glazing. This just turned. Sorry, Ryan. This is now a Lee Diffie glazing session. I'm sorry.
Okay,
like,
good. I mean, I love Lee Diffie, and it's funny because is this the moment when the pain ends? Is what replays in my head whenever we have like a rain delayed race or
oh my God,
something like that. And whenever we hit the halfway mark, I'm like, we get to go home. This is the moment the pain ends. Like I get to go home. I don't have to be here until like midnight. I think
lovely Diffie.
That was excellent. That was an excellent call. I think even 2024, just like the way that he pounces on these big moments, like even when Pato like takes the lead, like maybe that time is now, like just all these moments that just resonate in your head from that. So I'm just really appreciative of Lee. I'm appreciative of Townsend and Paul Tracy and just like everybody that put in work. I remember, and this is just related to, like, I remember pushing Georgia Henneberry so hard when to our team, like, hey, like, if we need someone to work on site, like this was someone at the time who was just graduating from like, I think University of Indiana. And I was like, really want Georgia on our social team at some point. And what happened instead was, and by no control of me in any way, shape, or form, like just the work that she put into to the Indy Next and then jump in to the IndyCar side, just it flowed so naturally. And I'm really happy, proud, hopeful that she finds everything. I just saw that they announced that they'll be having a baby boy. So like, just
that's cool.
Awesome.
Like that's very awesome. And then like Kevin Lee, just everybody on that side. I think it hit me a couple of times after we did our like sign off post. Like I definitely teared up a few times just reading, some of the comments. 'Cause I think like being part of that brand and with the goal of just growing the sport, making interactions, like you grow attached, that there's certain people like yourselves who you interact with on a weekly basis. They're probably going to be in the replies of these posts on a regular basis, and you form some friendships like outside of it. And I'm very glad that I've been able to do that with both of you. I think that gets a little bit emotional I think that probably was the moment that it hit, like knowing that for the time being is going to be the last post on that account for a while, right? Like, that's where it stings a little bit. And I don't, but I think that also offers a little bit of closure. I think that it'll probably like reopen the metaphorical scab when it's like content day or St. Pete and there's no like, effort to make that, where, the algorithm on Twitter and Instagram is conditioned to show you a lot of IndyCar stuff, right? Like on your personal feed, I'll be scrolling and I'm sure David Malukas will post some stupid, but like I say stupid as a compliment.
Trust me. Well, I've said worse. I've said a lot worse.
Yes.
We'll be posting some silly video. And that'll make me laugh. But at the same time, like when that green flag flies, like I wish Fox nothing but the best. Like at the end of the day, there's no like ill will or hard feelings from that perspective. You just want you spent all this time trying to grow the sport, and like you just do your best. And I think once it's hard to ignore, like probably like March, April was when things started trickling out, like that it might be that they're exploring other places, right? Like, you're going into the month of May and you're just like, all right, we've still got to lock in. Until that pen's on paper and they make the official announcement, we are the broadcasters. And until the end of the season, we are the broadcasters, right? Like that's where it's, you got to stay locked in. And I think we did a good job of that. I think the fact
because many people, sorry to cut you off, many people would have just phoned it in knowing that it was coming to an end, but I don't think you guys at NBC did that at all, whether it's the social media side or the TV production side. I think NBC kept it 100% rest of the way through. And that's what I just love most about NBC's IndyCar coverage. It's just, and everything really, it's just always like top notch, everything they do.
Yeah. And the passion shows.
I look at the, it's funny because I look at the way that we signed off with the Lee Diffie video at the end.
It was great.
And then I compare that to the way that we signed off when we lost the NBA for the first time, which I don't remember the exact year that it was. But like, I just think that it's clear that NBC cares about the sports that they cover, in the sense that like, we just want to grow the fans. We want to be positive about it. We don't want to dig too deep into the controversial moments. And I know it's funny. I think my first couple of lessons probably came the hard way when like I came from a journalism background. So like if there was a moment where someone said a spicy type of comment, right, where it might be a little bit controversial or might obviously paint the sport not in the best positive light. Like, I think you need to be sometimes careful and realize that like the primary goal is to market the sport, right? If it's something that's like going to actually hurt the sport, then that's certainly not a good thing. Like, I think it's no secret that like, what was it? Probably 2017, 2018, when things were looking a little bit bleak. If you had like an aerial view of a track, I think a lot of that was the vibe, right? Like if we were like, nobody's at this track, like that would not be great. And I'm very glad to see like a resurgence and the excitement, seeing like a track like North Wilkesboro come back. seeing Nashville, like just the Chicago street course, just seeing like it feels like NASCAR's just back, like
Yeah.
so. And in many ways, I think just to bring it back to IndyCar, I think like there's there's certainly been some things said in recent weeks, recent months that I think obviously the biggest one has been the Pato Who, like the billboard and everything everything that led up to that individual moment. Like, I don't think that's great. But yeah.
But all in all, NBC has done a great job, I think, with NASCAR, IndyCar, the Olympics. Like, I think you do great work, Ryan, and thank you for coming on the podcast. We have a couple more quick questions for you, and then we'll let you go. Sure. Want to ask, some of our listeners or watchers are probably interested, especially after everything you've shared with us, in a career similar to yours, whether it's social media or like PR or anything related, broadcast. Sure. What would be like a quick word of advice for them? Like, what should they do, and what would you suggest?
I think just diversify. I think there's certainly people who are very good at only video editing or only graphic design, right? If I think from a social media perspective, I think the challenge is to challenge yourself. I came into this role only really being part of like a Photoshop club. I had so much video experience work. I had cut commercials for NASCAR in the past, way back 10 years. But from a graphic design perspective, I didn't really know much. So I really spent a lot of time trying to take Lynda tutorials, do even just the basic YouTube tutorial to try to learn little things about blending modes and making cutouts and trying to make the graphic sides of things look better, and then constantly challenging myself from a video perspective. Like, just what I was doing wasn't enough. Like, what can I do visually that's going to attract someone in that first 2-3 seconds? Like, there were certainly periods, I think, when we started where videos couldn't be longer than 15 seconds on Instagram. And now they're allowed to be a little bit longer, but the key moment being like, you got 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. I think just diversifying, if you're looking to work in social media, I think goes a long way. If you are really, really strong at video editing, I still do recommend like learning some graphic design if you want to work in that field. Connect with people. That's one of the most valuable things that you could possibly do. And I think nowadays it's gotten a little bit easier to create your own content. You can have a lighting kit, and you can have a good webcam, or just even sometimes a cell phone, right? Like, I see some people who are just walking and talking, and they'll get some credentials and they'll be able to shoot little get to know the drivers type things. Like, I think that's fantastic. And I think it just diversifies the market. Like you two, like Taylor Kitchen, like I think
Queen. Oh,
absolute queen. She's great.
I was just thinking about her when you were talking.
It's funny because like the vibe is that Fox and NBC and CBS and ESPN, we're all competitors, right? And to so many degrees, yes, we're all competing for the same eyeballs. But when you go like NASCAR especially has been unique in that like there's no like middle fingers being thrown out at Fox, and then at the end of the day, you want to, if Fox does well, that's a good thing, because then it just rises. If they get good viewership, that
It rolls
There's a
into
good
NBC.
chance that you will get good viewership too. And at the same time, if Fox is posting really fire social media content or NBC's posting really fire social media content during their half of the season, that's actually a really good thing.
Yep.
You're
and I
working
was,
together.
and I want to
it's
bounce
good to
off of
have that social interaction. Like,
yeah,
of course, I want to beat Fox in social engagement. Who doesn't have that little bit of competitiveness in them? I'm sure Fox feels
right.
The Fox social manager. But at the same time, like, if we're both humming along, that's great. Like, as long as we're getting people talking, and now we've got Bleacher Report getting involved, and you're going to have the CW and Prime and all of these different outlets that are going to be talking about this sport. And that does create some competitiveness in the sense of like you're competing for everybody's attention. But I think if you're just having more people talking about one sport, I think that's just going to bring the sport up in a big way in 2025 and beyond.
And I was just going to say, like, in the content creator space, like I've talked with Eric Estep about content creation. We take a lot of inspiration from him, and I've told him that, and I bounce ideas off with Taylor Kitchen every once in a while as well. I mean, it's a whole, like, sure, we're competitors, but it's not like we're like enemies, like I'm friends with Taylor Kitchen, good friends with her. And like, it's just, you're right. Like it goes from the major networks all the way down to content creators. We all mutually benefit from each other's success. And Ryan, we got one more question for you, and it's our classic guest question. I let you choose between our two guest questions, and you chose this one. So Ryan, you can drive one lap in any car at any track. What would you do? What car? What track?
Oh man. I feel like I would really love to run a lap around Watkins Glen. Okay. I know it's an interesting one.
Who doesn't love Watkins Glen?
I mean, I would love to do that in a cup car. An Indy car around Indianapolis Motor Speedway would be incredible too. But I would say Watkins Glen. Like, I just remember playing. I remember getting the rate. I broke my arm when I was like 8-9 years old. Jesus. And to like help ease the pain a little bit, my parents got me a racing wheel. And I just remember sucking so bad at Watkins Glen. And I would just practice my butt off at Watkins Glen to try to learn the track, try to keep it out of the sand, learn turn one, learn the bus stop without going through the sand. And I got to a point where I was like so freaking good at that track.
Oh, that's cool.
That I would love to see what I could do.
Yeah.
What about you? I'm honestly curious. Do you mind if I ask that?
Well, you saying that reminds me of like on NASCAR 09, I used to just make laps and laps and laps at Sonoma.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason. I remember the one way I could hit this curb just right. I don't know why Sonoma specifically. Sometimes I would like to mess around on the track because there's this one big hill, and then I'll just jump off of it. But
yep, I would do the exact same thing in NASCAR Heat. Like, what was it? Turn 7, there was the right-hand corner, and then it would go through the S's at Sonoma.
Like
on NASCAR Heat, the OG NASCAR Heat, like 2000 I'm talking about.
Okay.
They had it where you would go off this hill, and it was so steep that you would just go flying. It was like you were in like the dunes in like the Sahara Desert or something like that.
I think my choice would be an IndyCar around IMS. That place has become so magical. I mean, it always has been, but especially now that I've been there twice, 3 times, I love that place. Doing a lap.
When you were there, awesome. Curious to know, did you get to go to the museum, the Indianapolis?
No.
I've been to the museum, but it was closed this past time. So Zack has it open.
Because aren't they renovating
next year?
it?
They're renovating it. I think they'll be ready by next year.
Yeah,
I hope so.
We'll go next year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Because the first year that I went to Indianapolis in 2022, it was they had the racing simulator, and you got to simulate a qualifying run in an Indy car. So like the full 4 laps, you do the full 4 laps around Indy. and you're seated in this. I mean, granted, it's not like it didn't look anything like an Indy car, but you're seated so low. And by the end of the fourth lap, like my leg is just shaking because you're just at rage. And I'm like I'm doing, my legs shaking. I'm nervous as hell.
And you're just sitting there. You're not even moving.
Like, and the worst thing that could possibly happen is I crash a computer car.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel anything. And yet, like, to know what these drivers do is insane. And whether it's any of these racing series, MotoGP, like IMSA, like it's just insane to see the talent level and the risks that they take.
And with that, Ryan, we are going to wrap up here. Where can people find you on socials, including your work?
Oh yeah. So first off, my Twitter is my first last name and NBC. Fairly easy to find there. Ryan DeCosta NBC. Instagram, a little bit different handle. It's RS DeCosta. For the racing socials, and at NBC Sports, NBC Olympics, NASCAR on NBC, was IndyCar on NBC, but
rest in peace.
Rest in peace, yeah. So NBC Sports, NBC Olympics, and NASCAR on NBC are the main ones. I'll have some influence on SNF on NBC. That's the Sunday Night Football account as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. This has been a long time coming. We've talked about this for a while, so this has been great to have happen.
Thank you so much. Really has been a pleasure.
And I can tell, like, you just have so much joy with your work, and that isn't, I mean, that's the dream, right? Like, so I'm so happy for you. Like,
appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode with Ryan DeCosta. Hopefully we'll have you back on one day, maybe, and we'll catch up. But so check out everything else on our channel, and Alex, take us home. I'm gonna let you take us home.
Yeah, so let's head home, guys. We have a kind comment before we head out. We have a comment from DM Punk 6085 on YouTube saying, "You guys are good at this. I'm glad I discovered you this year. 4 years of the podcast is a college degree in podcasting, Zach."
Yeah,
that's
so
crazy.
We are collegiate professionals at podcasting.
You can leave us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. You can subscribe on YouTube. We're closing on 400 subs on YouTube. We're getting to 500 followers on TikTok. You can support us on Patreon. Get some people leave a question. You can do that. Patreon.com/GayRacingPod for future guests.
Our Patreon subs are seeing this first.
Yes,
it's on Patreon
that's
first.
true.
It's going to be on Patreon
You'll get this
for
first.
At least a few days, I think. So
and socials and at Gay Racing Pod, at Newgaden, and Zach is at Dreamy Zach Racing.
Yep. All right. We will see you guys next time talking about a race weekend. Bye bye. Thank you so much, Ryan. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.